How dare you sit there? Look at me when I am talking to you. You are going to jail.
Ma'am, that is enough. You need to calm down right now.
Sir, that seat isn't yours. The words didn't come loud. They didn't need to. They cut clean, sharp enough to freeze the air in first class. Ethan Brooks didn't move. Not right away. His hand stayed wrapped around the worn leather handle of his carry-on, knuckles steady, breath slow. The kind of stillness that doesn't come from confusion, but from control. Around him, conversations dimmed. A fork paused halfway to someone's mouth. A man in a navy blazer leaned back just enough to watch without being obvious. Ethan lifted his eyes. The flight attendant, mid-30s, polished smile stretched just a little too tight, was already looking past him, not at him. Like the decision had been made before the words were spoken. "You're going to need to step out of the aisle," she added, softer now, but firmer. "We have to keep boarding moving, not fix the problem, not check the ticket. Move him." The man in seat 3 across the aisle let out a quiet breath, shaking his head just once. A woman near the window adjusted her scarf, eyes flicking between Ethan and the empty stretch of aisle like she was watching something unfold she'd seen before. Ethan blinked once. Slow. Because this moment didn't start here. It started hours earlier. Under a sky so dry it cracked the edges of your throat just breathing it in. Phoenix, Arizona. Ethan walked through Terminal 4 like a man carrying weight no one else could see. 45 years old, clean cut, tired in a way sleep never fixes. His phone buzzed again in his pocket. He ignored it. Not now. Not after a week where every call took something from him. He moved slower than the crowd. Not lost. Observing. A couple argued near the departure board, voices low but sharp. A young guy in a wrinkled suit hammered at his laptop, jaw tight, chasing a deadline that didn't care if he made it or not. A grandmother tried to calm a crying toddler with a tired smile that said she'd done this 1,000 times before. Ethan saw all of it. He always did. Because somewhere along the way, he'd learned that power wasn't loud. It was quiet. It watched. It remembered. He checked the screen. Gate confirmed. No delays. Good. He headed toward the Delta Lounge, rolling his carry-on behind him, the soft hum of its wheels cutting through the noise of the terminal. Inside, everything softened. Dim lighting. Low voices. The smell of coffee and polished wood. Ethan poured himself a cup. Black. No sugar. He sat by the window, looking out at the runway where planes lined up like obedient machines, waiting for permission to move. For a moment, he allowed himself to breathe. Just breathe. Then he saw the headline on his phone. Another airline apology. Overbooking. Passenger mistreatment. Ethan let out a quiet, humorless chuckle. They never learn, he muttered. But there was something in the way he said it. Not frustration. Recognition. 10 minutes later, his boarding alert buzzed. He stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked back into the current of people moving toward the gate. And that's when he saw her. Victoria Hale, late 50s, blonde hair cut sharp at the shoulders, cream blazer, pearl earrings that caught the overhead lights every time she turned her head. She stood near the first-class lane, tapping her foot, glancing at her watch like time itself owed her something. She didn't look at people. She assessed them. Her eyes passed over a man in jeans without stopping, paused half a second on a businessman in a tailored suit, then moved on. Sorting, ranking, deciding. Ethan noticed. Of course he did. But he said nothing. Just stepped forward when his group was called, handed over his phone, and walked down the jet bridge like every other passenger. Calm, controlled, unremarkable. Exactly how he preferred it. Because the most dangerous man in the room is the one no one thinks twice about. And in a few minutes, every person on that plane was going to wish they had. The cabin smelled like money, soft leather, warm towels, a faint trace of citrus and something aged, expensive, deliberate. First class wasn't just a seat, it was a statement, and every person settling into it knew exactly what it said about them. Ethan stepped inside without breaking stride. "Welcome aboard," a flight attendant said, voice smooth, practiced. Her smile landed on him for half a second, polite, distant, before shifting past him to the man behind. Brighter now, warmer. Ethan noticed. He always noticed. He moved down the aisle, his carry-on gliding behind him, eyes scanning without turning his head. Seat numbers, faces, small details. The way a man in row 1 adjusted his cufflinks twice, too precisely. The way a woman across the aisle held her champagne glass like she was holding on to something else entirely. Then he saw it. Row 2. Window seat. 2A. His seat. Occupied. Victoria Hale sat there like she'd been born into it. Back straight. One leg crossed over the other. Her handbag placed neatly beside her, claiming space before anyone could question it. A glass of sparkling water rested in her hand, condensation sliding slowly down the side. She didn't look up. Not when he stopped beside her. Not when his shadow cut across her lap. Ethan stood still for a second. Just one. The kind of pause that says more than words ever could. Then he spoke. "Excuse me." Calm. Even. Controlled. Victoria's eyes lifted slowly, like the interruption itself was an inconvenience she hadn't approved. "Yes?" she said, voice light but edged. "I think you might be in my seat." Ethan tilted his head slightly toward the window. "This is 2A." A flicker passed across her face, not confusion, not concern. Dismissal. "I'm in 2A," she replied, already looking back down at her phone. Conversation over, at least in her mind. Behind Ethan, the aisle tightened. A man shifted his weight, trying not to make it obvious he was listening. A woman leaned slightly into the aisle, curiosity pulling her forward inch by inch. Ethan didn't move. "I don't think so," he said quietly. "My boarding pass says 2A. You might want to double-check yours." Victoria let out a soft laugh, the kind people use when they think they're being patient with someone beneath them. "I fly this route all the time," she said, lifting her phone just enough to flash the screen. "I know where I'm sitting." Ethan leaned in just slightly. Close enough to see. Not close enough to invade. 3C clear. Unmistakable. He straightened. "That says 3C, he said. For a fraction of a second, something cracked, a hesitation, a misstep. Then it was gone. "No," she snapped, sharper now. "That's not right. I always sit here. Always." The word hung in the air like ownership, like entitlement carved into something that was never hers to begin with. Ethan exhaled slowly through his nose. His grip tightened on the strap of his bag. Not anger. Not yet. Control. Seats don't work like that, he said. They change every flight. Victoria's jaw tightened. Her fingers curled around her phone, nails pressing into the glass. Well, then they made a mistake, she shot back. Because this is my seat. A murmur rippled through the cabin. Quiet. Subtle. But there. Someone behind Ethan whispered, "That's not how it works." Another voice, lower. "She's wrong." Victoria heard it. Her shoulders stiffened. But she didn't move. Ethan looked at her. Really looked this time. Past the blazer. Past the pearls. Into the certainty sitting behind her eyes. He'd seen it before. Boardrooms. Elevators. Restaurants where the host hesitated just a second too long before seating him. The assumption. The quiet decision. Who belongs? Who doesn't? He leaned in just enough for his voice to land without rising. "With all due respect," he said, each word measured, deliberate. "I paid for 2A. That's my seat." A beat. Silence stretched thin across the cabin. Victoria smiled, but there was nothing polite about it now. "Then maybe," she said slowly, "you should sit in 3C. The words hit harder than she intended, because it wasn't just a suggestion. It was a correction. Know your place. The air shifted. Ethan didn't blink. Didn't step back. Didn't raise his voice. "I'm not moving," he said. 6 words. Flat. Final. And just like that, the entire cabin leaned in. Because something had just changed. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This was a line, and neither of them was about to step back. The silence broke when heels clicked sharply against the aisle. A flight attendant approached fast, smile already in place before she even reached them. Early 30s, blonde hair pulled tight. Name tag, Amanda Collins. Her eyes moved quickly. Ethan, Victoria, the small circle of attention forming around them. She read the room in seconds. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, voice bright, just a little too bright. Victoria turned first. Of course she did. "Yes," she said, exhaling like she'd been waiting. "This man is insisting I'm in his seat." Amanda's gaze shifted to Ethan. Slower this time. Measuring. Ethan held her eyes. Calm, unblinking. "My boarding pass says 2A, he said. "She's in 3C. Amanda nodded, reaching out her hand. "Let me take a look at both passes." Victoria handed over her phone with a sigh, her fingers lingering just long enough to show reluctance. Ethan followed, passing his over without hesitation. Amanda glanced down. 2 seconds. 3. Ethan watched it happen. That flicker. That moment where the answer was clear before the words were spoken. Victoria. 3C. Ethan. 2A. Simple. Clean. But Amanda didn't speak right away. Her smile stayed. Professional. Controlled. But there was a pause now. A calculation. Behind Ethan, someone shifted. Another phone lifted, subtle but steady. The quiet hum of attention tightened. Amanda looked up. "Well," she began, voice careful. "It looks like there may have been some confusion." Confusion. Ethan's jaw tightened just slightly. "There's no confusion," he said. "Her seat is 3C. Victoria crossed her arms, leaning back deeper into the leather, like she was anchoring herself to it. "I already told him," she said, turning her head toward Amanda, voice dropping into something softer, more familiar. "I always sit in this seat. I booked early. I'm a frequent flyer." There it was. Not a fact. A credential. Amanda's eyes flicked back to her, then to Ethan, the balance shifting. Not based on truth, based on comfort. "Well," Amanda said, lowering her voice just enough to feel private. "Sometimes the system updates seats last minute, especially for valued passengers." Valued. The word landed heavy. Ethan let out a slow breath. "My ticket didn't change," he said, "and neither did hers." Amanda nodded quickly, too quickly. Of course, I just want to make sure we get everyone seated smoothly so we can depart on time." Depart on time. Not do what's right. Keep things moving. She turned slightly toward Ethan, voice softening. "Sir," she said, "would you be open to taking another seat? We do have a few available. I can offer you a complimentary drink, maybe a voucher for a future flight." There it was. The ask. Move. Ethan didn't respond immediately. Across the aisle, a man in a grey suit shook his head under his breath. A woman near the window frowned, her fingers tightening around her glass. Victoria smiled again. Subtle. Satisfied. Ethan looked at Amanda, then at Victoria, then back at Amanda. "You're asking me to give up the seat I paid for," he said, voice low, steady, so she can sit where she wants. Amanda's smile faltered for half a second. "I'm asking for flexibility," she replied, "just to avoid any disruption." Disruption. Ethan felt it rise. Not anger. Something colder. Older. He'd heard that word before. In boardrooms when his ideas were too aggressive. In meetings when his presence made people uncomfortable. Always the same solution. Adjust. Step back. Make it easier for everyone else. Ethan straightened. "No," he said. One word. Clear. Final. Amanda blinked. Not expecting it. "I'm sorry," she asked. "I'm not moving," Ethan said. "That's my seat." The cabin went still again. Victoria's smile disappeared. "Oh, for God's sake," she snapped, her voice louder now, sharper. "This is ridiculous. You're holding up the entire plane over a seat." Ethan didn't look at her. "This isn't about a seat," he said quietly. That got her attention. Amanda shifted her weight, the pressure building around her now. Eyes watching. Phones recording. Time ticking. "Sir," she said, voice tightening, "if you don't cooperate, we may have to escalate this situation." Escalate. The word echoed. Ethan's gaze hardened just a fraction. "Then escalate it," he said. A beat. No one moved. No one spoke. And somewhere in the distance, a cockpit door clicked open. The cockpit door opened with a sharp, metallic click. Heads turned. A man stepped out. Tall, late 50s, silver hair cut with military precision. Captain Robert Ellis. His presence filled the aisle before he said a word. Authority didn't need volume. It carried in posture, in pace, in the way people instinctively moved aside. "What's going on here?" he asked, voice low, controlled. Amanda straightened immediately. "Captain, We have a seating issue. Passenger refusing to relocate. Refusing. Not assigned seat. Not valid ticket. Refusing. Ellis's eyes moved to Ethan. Quick scan. Jeans. Simple polo. No visible status markers. His gaze lingered for a fraction too long, then shifted to Victoria. Cream blazer. Pearls. Composed. He had seen this dynamic before, or at least he thought he had. "Sir," Ellis said, stepping closer, "I understand there's some confusion. We need you to cooperate so we can depart on time." Ethan looked up at him. No hesitation, no deference. "There's no confusion," he said. "I'm in my assigned seat." Amanda interjected quickly. "Captain, we offered him alternative seating, but he's refusing again." Ellis exhaled slowly, the patience of a man who had dealt with hundreds of difficult passengers. "Sir," he said, tone firmer now, "my crew has the authority to reassign seats as needed. I'm asking you to comply." A murmur moved through the cabin. A woman whispered, "That's not right." A man closer to the aisle leaned forward, watching intently, phone half hidden in his hand. Ethan didn't raise his voice. He didn't move. He just spoke. "With all due respect, Captain," he said, "authority doesn't override a paid seat." Ellis's jaw tightened. That wasn't the response he expected. Victoria leaned forward, inserting herself into the space. "This is absurd," she said, her voice carrying now. "I've been flying with this airline for years. I always sit here. I don't see why this is even a discussion." Ellis nodded slightly toward her. Acknowledgement, familiarity. Then back to Ethan. "There are other seats available," he said. "This isn't worth delaying the flight. Not worth it." Ethan felt something shift inside him. Not a spike. A slow burn. He'd heard that before, too. Not worth the fight. Not worth the disruption. Not worth standing your ground. He leaned back slightly, just enough to break the tension in his shoulders. But his eyes stayed locked on Ellis. "If it's not worth it," Ethan said quietly, "then she can move." Silence. Clean. Sharp. Amanda inhaled, barely audible. Victoria's face flushed, a quick flash of red across her cheeks. "Excuse me," she snapped. Ethan didn't look at her. Ellis did. For the first time, the balance shifted. Just slightly. But it was enough. "Ma'am," Ellis said, turning toward Victoria, "your ticket shows 3C. Her expression hardened instantly. "That's a mistake," she shot back. "And I'm not moving." The words hit the air like a slap. Flat. Defiant. Ellis hesitated. There it was again. That calculation. Time. Pressure. Perception. Who's easier to move? Who's harder to confront? Behind them, more phones were visible now. Not hidden. Not subtle. The quiet hum had turned into something sharper. Expectation. Ethan watched it all. Every glance. Every pause. He didn't interrupt. He didn't push. He just let the moment stretch. Because he knew something they didn't. Power didn't rush. It waited. Ellis shifted his stance, decision forming. "Sir," he said, turning back to Ethan, voice colder now, "this is your final request. Either you relocate voluntarily, or we will have to remove you from the aircraft." The word remove hung heavy, a threat wrapped in procedure. Across the aisle, the man in the grey suit shook his head again, slower this time. "This is wrong," he muttered. "Not quiet enough." Victoria leaned back, arms crossed, victory already settling into her posture. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief second. Not in defeat. In control. When he opened them again, something had changed. The softness was gone. What remained was precise. "Focused, you want to remove me," he said, voice calm, almost too calm, for sitting in the seat I paid for. Ellis didn't respond. He didn't need to. The answer was already there. Ethan reached into his jacket. Slow, deliberate. Every movement watched now, every breath held. And somewhere near the back of the cabin, someone whispered, "This is about to get bad." Ethan didn't rush. His fingers slid into the inner pocket of his jacket with the kind of precision that comes from habit, not hesitation. The entire cabin seemed to lean forward at once, the silence tightening, stretching thin like glass about to crack. Captain Ellis watched his hand. Amanda held her breath. Victoria didn't move, but her eyes sharpened, tracking every inch of motion like she was waiting for proof she'd been right all along. Ethan pulled something out. Not fast, not slow, just controlled. A phone. He unlocked it with a single motion, his thumb steady, then lifted it slightly. Not toward them, not yet. Just enough for the screen to glow between his hands. "For the record," he said, voice level, "it's 3:27 in the afternoon. Flight 278 to Dallas." The words landed differently now. Not defensive. Documented. A shift. Amanda blinked. "Sir, you don't need to record this." Ethan didn't look at her. "I do," he said. Simple. Final. He raised the phone a little higher, the camera now clearly pointed, not aggressively, just present, observing, capturing. Victoria let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, please," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "You think filming is going to change anything?" Ethan's gaze flicked to her for the first time in several seconds. "No," he said. "I think it makes things clear." That landed. Because clarity was dangerous. Clarity didn't bend. Captain Ellis stepped closer, lowering his voice, trying to contain the moment before it spread further. "Sir," he said, "you're escalating this situation." Ethan held his gaze. "No," he replied quietly. "I'm documenting it." A beat. Behind them, a phone clicked, then another. The subtle sound of recordings beginning to stack. A woman in row 3 leaned into the aisle, her voice cutting through the tension. "He showed his ticket," she said. "Why are you not honoring it?" Amanda turned, forcing a tight smile. "Ma'am, please remain seated." But the shift had already started. People weren't just watching anymore. They were thinking, questioning. Victoria felt it. Her posture stiffened, her grip tightening around the armrest. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You're letting him turn this into a spectacle." "I have places to be." Ethan's voice came back, calm as ever. "So do I." She turned toward him sharply. "Then stop holding everyone up." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "I'm not the one in the wrong seat." The words hit clean. No volume, no anger, just truth. Victoria opened her mouth, then stopped. For a split second there was nothing there. No comeback, no deflection. Captain Ellis saw it, and he didn't like it. Control was slipping. Enough, he said, voice firm now, cutting across the cabin. We are done with this discussion. He turned toward Ethan, the decision settling hard in his tone. Sir, I'm instructing you to leave the aircraft. There it was. Clear. Unavoidable. Amanda shifted, her shoulders tightening. Even she felt the weight of that call. A passenger near the aisle spoke up, louder this time. He's not doing anything wrong. Another voice followed. This isn't right. The cabin was no longer quiet. It was awake. Victoria's eyes flicked around, just briefly, sensing the shift, but she held her ground, chin lifting higher. Ethan didn't react to the noise. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He just lowered his phone slightly, his thumb tapping once on the screen. Saving. Then he looked at Ellis. Steady, unmoved. If I leave this plane, Ethan said, each word deliberate, it won't be quietly. Ellis's jaw tightened. Is that a threat? Ethan shook his head once. No, he said. That's a fact. The difference hung in the air. Facts didn't need volume. They carried weight on their own. Ellis glanced at Amanda, then toward the front of the cabin, calculating again. Time. Delay. Optics. Victoria leaned back, a slow smile returning. Thinner now, but still there. You're making a mistake, she said under her breath, just loud enough for Ethan to hear. Ethan looked at her. Really looked this time. And for the first time, there was something new in his expression. Not anger, not frustration. Recognition. You already did, he said quietly. A ripple moved through the cabin again, because something in his tone had changed. Not louder, not sharper, just deeper, like whatever came next was already in motion. The radio on Amanda's shoulder crackled, sharp, sudden, loud enough to cut through everything. Gate security en route. 3 words, and just like that, the air changed, not tense anymore, heavy, irreversible. A man in the second row leaned back slowly, whispering, "They're actually calling security over this." The disbelief in his voice spread faster than any announcement. Victoria didn't react right away, but her fingers tightened against the armrest, nails pressing into leather now instead of resting on it. She had expected resistance, maybe a raised voice, maybe a reluctant compromise. Not this. Ethan stood exactly where he was, still, centered. The phone remained in his hand, lowered now but active, recording every breath, every word, every decision made in real time. Captain Ellis straightened his jacket, reclaiming control through posture alone. "This is procedure," he said, more to the cabin than to Ethan. "We cannot allow disruption during boarding." Disruption. Again. Ethan let the word sit in his mind. Then he spoke. "What disruption?" he asked quietly. No one answered, because there wasn't one. Not until they created it. Amanda shifted her weight, glancing toward the front, then back at Ethan. Her voice softened again, almost pleading now. "Sir, please, let's not take this any further." Further. Like there was still a line left to cross. Ethan's eyes moved across the cabin. Phone's out now. No one hiding it anymore. A woman in row 4 holding hers, steady with both hands. A younger man near the aisle, whispering into his, narrating under his breath. Witnesses, documenting, thinking. This wasn't quiet anymore. This was exposure. Victoria felt it pressing in. She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice, trying to pull control back into something smaller, more manageable. "Just take the other seat," she said. "This is embarrassing." Ethan looked at her, and for the first time, there was no patience left in that look. "Not for me," he said. Her lips pressed tight. Captain Ellis stepped closer again, lowering his voice, but there was steel in it now. "When security gets here," he said, "you'll be escorted off. I'd advise you to cooperate." "Advise?" Ethan gave a small nod. "I understand," he said. Simple. Calm. Too calm. Because something about his tone made Amanda glance at him again. Longer this time. Searching. This wasn't fear. This wasn't panic. This was certainty. The footsteps came next. Heavy. Measured, closing in from the jet bridge. 2 officers appeared at the entrance of the cabin. Dark uniforms, neutral expressions, the kind of faces trained not to react, not to assume. But even they paused for half a second when they saw the scene. A man standing still. A woman seated, rigid. A crew clustered too tightly. Phones everywhere. "All right," one of the officers said, stepping forward. "What seems to be the issue?" Captain Ellis didn't hesitate. "Passenger refusing to comply with crew instructions," he said, nodding toward Ethan. "We need him removed." Removed. The word echoed again. The officer looked at Ethan, then at the phone in his hand, then at the faces around them. "Sir," the officer said, voice even, "can I see your boarding pass?" Ethan handed it over without a word. No resistance, no argument. The officer studied it. 1 second, 2. His brow shifted just slightly. "This says Seat 2A, he said. The cabin went quiet again. Different this time. Sharper. Amanda stepped in quickly. "There's been a discrepancy in the system." The officer didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the screen. Then he glanced at Victoria. "Ma'am, your boarding pass?" Victoria hesitated. Just a fraction too long. Then she lifted her phone, forcing a composed smile. "Of course." The officer took it, looked, and there it was. 3C. Clear. Undeniable. He exhaled slowly through his nose, then looked back at Captain Ellis. "Captain," he said carefully. "His ticket checks out." A crack. Small, but real. Victoria's smile vanished. Amanda's posture tightened. Ellis didn't respond right away. Because for the first time, the truth was no longer quiet. It was standing in the aisle. Out loud. On record. And impossible to ignore. No one spoke for a full 3 seconds. Not the captain, not Amanda, not Victoria. Because once the truth is said out loud, it doesn't disappear. It just waits for someone to deal with it. The officer still held both boarding passes, one in each hand. He looked from one to the other again, slower this time, like he was giving them a second chance to change. They didn't. "Sir's in 2A, he repeated, voice steady. "Ma'am is in 3C. The words landed harder the second time. Victoria shifted in her seat. Subtle, but visible. Her posture lost a fraction of its certainty. Just enough. Amanda stepped forward quickly, trying to close the gap. "There must be a system override," she said. "Sometimes seats are reassigned for operational reasons." The officer finally looked at her. What kind of override moves someone out of their paid seat without notice? He asked. Amanda hesitated, because there wasn't a good answer. Captain Ellis stepped in, voice firm again, reclaiming ground. We're not debating policy, he said. We're resolving a situation that's delaying departure. Delaying. Always back to time. Always back to control. The officer didn't back down. With respect, Captain, he said, this doesn't look like a delay issue. A ripple moved through the cabin again. People weren't whispering anymore. They were watching openly now. Evaluating. Judging. Victoria felt it closing in. Her chin lifted again, but it wasn't as steady as before. I don't see why this is becoming such a spectacle, she said, voice tight. I've already explained. I always sit here. I'm a priority customer. Priority. The word hung there, thinner now. The officer turned toward her. Ma'am, he said calmly, priority doesn't override a ticket. That landed. Clean. Final. Ethan said nothing. He didn't need to. He stood there, phone still in his hand, capturing every shift, every crack forming in real time. Amanda glanced at him again, and this time, something in her expression changed. Not irritation, concern. Because the narrative she had been holding on to was slipping. Fast. Captain Ellis felt it too. He adjusted his stance, voice dropping lower, more controlled, but sharper underneath. We're not going to hold this flight any longer, he said. Either we resolve this now, or we remove the disruption. Disruption. Again. Ethan's eyes moved to her slowly. You keep using that word, he said. Like I created this. Ellis didn't respond, because he couldn't, not without acknowledging what was now obvious to everyone watching. The officer shifted his weight, then handed Ethan his boarding pass back. You're good here, sir, he said quietly. Simple. Clear. But not loud enough to end it. Because ending it meant someone had to lose. And no one in uniform wanted that to be them. Victoria leaned forward suddenly, her voice cutting sharper now. So what? I'm supposed to just move? She said. After all this? The question wasn't about the seat anymore. It was about status, control, being told no. The officer met her eyes. Yes, ma'am, he said. Silence. Heavy, unavoidable. Victoria didn't move. Her fingers curled tighter, her breathing shifted, just slightly faster now. I'm not moving, she said. There it was. The line reset. Again. Amanda closed her eyes for half a second. Ellis's jaw tightened. The officer exhaled slowly. Because now it wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't confusion. It was refusal. And that changed everything. Ethan watched it all unfold. The resistance, the denial, the unraveling. He didn't step in, didn't interrupt. Because this moment was no longer about him proving anything. It was about them deciding who they were. Captain Ellis turned slightly toward the officers. If she refuses, he said, voice controlled, we may need to consider removing her instead. The words hit like a shockwave. Victoria's head snapped toward him. Excuse me, she said, disbelief cutting through her voice. But Ellis didn't look at her. Not anymore. Because now the room had shifted. And for the first time since this started, he realized he might have picked the wrong side. Victoria laughed, not loud, not confident. The kind of laugh that breaks halfway through because it doesn't quite believe itself. "You can't be serious," she said, looking from the officer to Captain Ellis, searching for something. Support, authority, control. She didn't find it. Ellis didn't meet her eyes. That was new. 5 minutes ago, the entire cabin had bent around her certainty. Now it stood still, waiting to see if it would collapse. "Ma'am," the officer said, voice steady. "You're in the wrong seat. We need you to move to 3C so we can finish boarding. Simple, direct, final." Victoria's fingers tightened around her handbag. The leather creaked softly under the pressure. "I am not moving," she said again, slower this time, each word pressed out like it cost her something. "This is unacceptable." Behind her, someone muttered, "No, this is reality." A few heads nodded. Amanda stepped forward, voice softer now, almost cautious. "Ms. Hale," she said, using her name for the first time. "We just need to resolve this quickly. Quickly." Still trying to shrink the moment. Victoria turned on her. "So now you're siding with him?" she snapped. Amanda flinched, just slightly. "I'm siding with the seating chart," she replied, quieter. That landed, because it wasn't personal anymore. It was documented, logged, recorded. Ethan shifted his weight for the first time since this started. Not restless, just present, grounded. He lowered his phone slightly, but it stayed on. Watching. Remembering. Victoria noticed. Of course she did. Her eyes locked onto it like it was the real threat now. "Turn that off," she said sharply. Ethan didn't move. "No," he said. One word. Flat. She leaned forward, voice rising. "You don't have permission to record me." Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "You're in a public space," he said. "On a commercial flight. There's no expectation of privacy." The words were calm, precise, informed. That hit harder than anything else, because it sounded like someone who knew exactly where the lines were, and exactly how not to cross them. The officer glanced at Ethan, then back at Victoria. "Ma'am," he said, "we need your cooperation." Victoria looked around. Really looked. At the phones, at the faces, at the quiet judgment settling into every corner of the cabin. Something shifted. Not surrender. Not yet. But the ground beneath her certainty was cracking. "I've flown with this airline for over 20 years, she said, voice lower now, trying a different angle. "I know people. This is going to be a problem for you." The officer didn't react. Captain Ellis finally spoke. "If this continues," he said, voice controlled, "the problem will be missing this flight." That landed. Hard. Because now the consequence had a shape. Immediate. Personal. Victoria's lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time, she looked unsure. Amanda took a small step back. The distance was subtle, but it was there. No longer standing beside her. No longer reinforcing her. Ethan watched it all with quiet focus. Every shift, every retreat, every recalculation. Because this wasn't just about a seat anymore. It was about what happens when certainty meets reality. And reality doesn't move. Victoria exhaled sharply, looking down at her phone, then back up again. One last attempt. "This is unbelievable," she said, You're all making a mistake." No one answered, because at this point, the mistake had already been made. And it wasn't by Ethan. The officer extended a hand toward the aisle. "Ma'am," he said, not unkind, but not flexible either. "Please stand up." A pause, long enough to feel, short enough to end. Victoria didn't move, but something in her face changed. Not anger, not pride. Something closer to realization, and when she finally placed her hand on the armrest, the entire cabin held its breath. Victoria pushed herself up slowly, not defeated, not fully, but no longer untouchable. The leather seat exhaled as her weight lifted, a soft sound that carried further than it should have. For a moment, she stood there in the aisle, still holding onto the armrest like it might pull her back into the version of reality she had walked in with. It didn't. The officer stepped slightly to the side, giving her space. "Thank you," he said. "Professional, neutral, done." Victoria adjusted her blazer with sharp, controlled movements, smoothing it down like she could iron out what had just happened. Her chin lifted again, but it didn't carry the same weight. She turned toward Ethan, eyes locked. There was something there now. Not apology, not even acknowledgement. Just a quiet, burning resentment. "This isn't over," she said under her breath. Ethan met her gaze, unmoved. "It already is," he replied. She held his eyes for a second longer, then looked away first. That was the moment. Small, but final. She stepped into the aisle, heels clicking again. But the sound was different now. Less sharp, less certain. She moved past row 2, past row 3, toward the back where 3C waited. Not as a choice, as a correction. The cabin exhaled with her. Tension broke in small, quiet ways. A man leaned back in his seat. A woman lowered her phone, shaking her head slowly. Someone whispered, "About time." Amanda moved quickly now, resetting the scene. "All right, folks," she said, voice bright again, almost too fast. "Let's get everyone settled so we can get ready for departure." But the tone didn't land the same, because everyone had seen it, felt it, understood it. Captain Ellis remained where he stood for a second longer, watching Victoria disappear down the aisle. His jaw was tight, but his posture had shifted. Less command, more awareness. He turned back to Ethan. A pause, just enough to acknowledge what had happened. "Sir," he said, voice measured, "you can take your seat." Ethan didn't respond right away. He stepped forward, placing his bag into the overhead compartment with smooth, deliberate motion. No rush, no hesitation. Then he sat. 2A, window seat. Exactly where he had always been supposed to be. The leather adjusted beneath him, the armrest cool against his hand. The space, finally, his. But the moment didn't end there. Because now, people were watching him. Not questioning. Not doubting. Watching. The man in the grey suit leaned slightly across the aisle. "Handled that well," he said quietly. Ethan gave a small nod. "That's one way to put it." The woman by the window in row 3 leaned forward. "They were wrong," she said. "From the start." Ethan looked at her. "Yes," he said. "They were. Simple. No bitterness. Just fact." Amanda approached again, slower this time. Her smile was still there, but it had changed, less polished, more careful. Mr. She hesitated, glancing briefly at the passenger list on her tablet. Brooks. We apologize for the inconvenience. Inconvenience? Ethan almost smiled, but didn't. I'm sure you do, he said. Her fingers tightened slightly around the tablet. Is there anything we can offer you? She asked. Complimentary service, additional? No, Ethan said gently. I'm good. Amanda nodded. Relief, discomfort, both. She stepped back. Captain Ellis gave one last look toward Ethan, then turned and walked back toward the cockpit. The door closed behind him with a quiet, final click. The cabin settled. Engines hummed faintly beneath the floor. Normal, on the surface. But something had shifted. Something deeper. Because now there was a story sitting in seat 2A. Not loud, not announced, but present. Ethan leaned back, eyes moving to the window as the runway stretched out beyond the glass. For a moment, everything was still. Then his phone buzzed. Once. Short, precise. He glanced down. The screen lit up. One message. Unknown number. Call me. We need to talk. Urgent. Ethan stared at it for a second. Then another. His expression didn't change. But something behind his eyes did. Because whatever this flight had just been, it wasn't the real story. Not even close. Ethan didn't open the message right away. He let the screen dim in his hand, the reflection of the runway flickering faintly across the glass. Outside, the ground crew moved with practiced urgency, guiding a machine that weighed thousands of pounds as if it were routine. Inside, the cabin had settled. Voices low again, seatbelts clicking. A flight attendant offering drinks 2 rows ahead, like nothing had happened. But something had. It lingered, in the way people glanced at him, then looked away, in the way Amanda avoided holding his gaze for more than a second, in the way silence carried weight now, not comfort. Ethan exhaled slowly and tapped the message. No greeting, no name, just a number he didn't recognize. He pressed call. 1 ring. 2. The line connected. Mr. Brooks, a voice said immediately. Male, controlled, not surprised. Ethan didn't speak. He listened. We've been monitoring the situation on your flight, the voice continued. You handled it appropriately. Ethan's eyes stayed on the window. Who is this? He asked. A pause. Not hesitation. Calculation. You can think of me as someone who understands the position you're in, the voice said, and the position you're about to step into. Ethan's grip tightened slightly around the phone. I'm already in my seat, he said. The man on the other end gave a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. That's not the seat I'm talking about. The engines outside began to rise, a low rumble building beneath the cabin floor. Ethan didn't interrupt. 3 weeks ago, the voice continued, you acquired controlling interest in Meridian Air Group through a series of private transactions. Silence. Then, 49.8% direct, another 12 through proxy agreements. The numbers landed like weight, real, measured, documented. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief second. Not surprise, confirmation. You move fast, Ethan said quietly. We move precisely, the voice replied. And right now, every major airline in this country is watching what happens next. Ethan opened his eyes again. The runway stretched ahead. Clear, uninterrupted. What happens next? He said. Already happened. A pause on the line. Then, no, the voice said. What happened was recorded. What happens next is what you choose to do with it. Ethan's gaze shifted. Across the aisle. A man scrolling through his phone, replaying the moment from earlier. 2 rows back. A woman typing rapidly, likely posting, sharing, spreading. The story was already moving. Beyond the cabin. Beyond this flight. This wasn't about a seat, Ethan said. I know, the voice replied. It never is. The engines roared louder now. The plane beginning to move. Slow, steady, committed. Ethan leaned back into his seat, the leather firm against his shoulders. They made a decision, he said. Yes, the voice answered. And so will you. A beat. Then the line went dead. No goodbye. No instruction. Just silence. Ethan lowered the phone, looked out the window as the aircraft turned toward the runway, the city stretching wide in the distance, unaware of what had just shifted inside a single cabin. Power didn't announce itself. It revealed itself. Quietly. At the exact moment, people thought they understood the room. Ethan adjusted his sleeve, eyes steady now. Something settled deep beneath the surface. Not anger, not victory. Purpose. Because somewhere above 30,000 feet, decisions would be made that reached far beyond one flight, one seat, one moment. And this time, they would not be ignored. The plane accelerated. Faster. Faster. Until the ground disappeared. And everything changed. If you've ever seen a moment where someone was judged too quickly, where the truth showed up too late for comfort, stay with stories like this. Hit like, subscribe, and drop 3 words in the comments. Stand your ground.